I mean, who knows what I'm selling at the Pixie Anarchy Fair? I'm not sure. Looks like fun. So I think you all pretty much know me. My name's Rex. I've been since 2018. I'm mostly learning on computer things. And in my real life, I teach woodworking on YouTube. I started out as a custom furniture builder in late 20 teens, and then I migrated onto YouTube after a while. And to my utter shock, that turned into a full time career. Now I've been making videos full time for the last 7 years. That's what I do professionally. And and I don't have a space, and I don't have a garage to do this. I thought about that for a long time, and I thought, well, what we should do is just think about what woodworking was like back before all that shit existed, because all that electrical equipment is really new. Like, human beings have been making things out of wood for thousands of years. So if we just go back to before the machinery existed and do it that way, we can make woodworking way more accessible by using tools that are smaller, safer, take up way less space, and are much less likely to injure you. Now that I've said that, obviously I'm going to injure myself. So when Grant asked me to do or talk this morning, I was like, well, I don't really know anything about smithing that you guys don't know. I only get to do it once a week, and I'm maybe intermediate at best. But what I could do is show you guys some things about woodworking, because every craftsman I know, no matter what they do, needs to make something out of wood once in a while. So it seems like the best thing I can do today is show you guys how you can do some simple woodworking projects, mostly using tools you already own, even using some of the blacksmith tools like blacksmith vice, and still make some basic woodworking stuff without having to build a workbench or get into any of that stuff. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a mallet. We're going to start with firewood. I got some just pieces on the log pile right there. And we're going to make this mallet. I call this a 3-tool mallet because you really can make it with 3 tools. We're going to use more just to make life easier. You can make this mallet with a saw, a drill, and a hatchet. That's all you need to make a mallet like this. We're going to throw in a rasp and a couple other tools to make things a little bit easier. And what I like about these is because it's made out of just a nice hardwood. It's very sturdy, but also it was free and it was easy to make. So if I have one of those projects where I have to beat on something really hard and the mallet falls apart, well, what do I care? It was free and I made it in an hour. So I think it's really good to have some tools in your life that are sort of disposable, because once in a while the tools sort of get sacrificed to the project. So before we get started, it's good. It happens sometimes. We're like, if I'm going to finish this, this thing's going to get destroyed. If you can make your mallet yourself, what do you care if it falls apart? It doesn't make any difference. Before we start making something, it's really good to have a workspace. So you can use your post vise. That's perfectly good. I just made a couple of soft draws here for this one. I just took some scraps of wood and some of those strong magnets from Harbor Freight. And these go right over the jaws just like this, and they stick on there. And that way I can use my post vise to hold some of my work, but it's not going to crush the fibers or mess up the wood. And then I'll ask you guys a question once in a while. You can go ahead and shout out the answer. It's more fun if it's interactive. I got a chopping block right here, and I know that a lot of people have a stump or a block. And I'm going to ask you guys, why do I have mine up on legs? What's the point of that?
Dressing chicken, don't bend over.
Dressing chickens, interesting. No, these are not the answers I was expecting. Why not just have a whole log like works out over there? Portability. Yeah. Don't raise your hand. I'm not a teacher. God damn it, Jan.
Yes, sir, Professor Rex.
Jesus Christ, people. Yeah, it's just portable. And the other thing about having a piece of wood up like this is it's not going to rot. I've had a lot of logs and stumps in my shop, and then one day I go to move them and I pick them up and a bunch of worms fall out the bottom. Because bugs get into them and you don't even notice. If you have something up like this, the air's moving around it, it dries out, and you don't have to worry that it's going to rot or get an infestation. And another thing I have over here is a saw bench. A lot of people don't know about these. It's not a saw horse. It's lower, and the point of that is you can kneel on it. So holding your work is really easy. You throw a board down, you kneel on it, you can hand saw it or surf saw it. That's why it's low like that. And this one's just made out of 3 2x4s and some screws and some glue. Anybody can make one of these. So if you got a vise and a block like this and a saw bench like this, you can do some woodwork. It's not a big deal. For our work today, we're just going to use a couple of saws. I'm going to use mostly this cross-cut saw, inexpensive, $30. Get this off Amazon. I'm going to use a drill. I'm going to use an old brace and bit, mostly because it doesn't make any noise and I talk while I'm using it. But a power drill is totally fine. It's just like an inexpensive spade bit. And then I'm also going to use a hatchet. Now for woodworking, I often use a single bevel hatchet. They call that a hewing hatchet. A lot of people don't even look at their hatchet when they get one. But if you look, you might have a single bevel one. That's really good. Hewing hatchets are made for actually making flat surfaces in wood, but you don't need one of those. This is just a Boy Scout hatchet. It's just a plumb hatchet. A regular one like you would find in a flea market. I found this at a flea market. It was $5. It's a really great tool. Most important thing with something like this is it needs to be really sharp. So a lot of people, they think of an axe or a hatchet as being just for splitting and chopping. They don't realize it can also be a good cutting and sort of slicing tool if it's sharp enough. But that's really easy. This is diamond stone that I bought from Home Depot. It was not expensive. Get your axe or your hatchet just like this, and then work that bevel in circles this way with a fine sharpening stone like diamond stone. Oil stones are great. I really like oil stones. Diamond stone's nice because it's stronger than oil stone. It won't break, so it's much more portable than that. And this is kind of circular motion, mostly pulling over the edge. That's really good. And if the bevel's in real bad shape, you might have to grind it or file it or something like that. Once you get a nice bevel, you can just hone it up with a stone like that. And then the other thing that's really important for really almost any edge tool is you need a strop. And a strop is just a piece of leather, just scrap leather glued to a piece of wood. And then I put some green chromium oxide compound on this. It really doesn't matter. Any buffing compound, polishing compound. And then you just want to push that over the edge like that. And the strap is another abrasive. It's a super, super fine abrasive. What I always think is cool is the thing starts out green from that chromium oxide and it turns gray. That's how you can see it actually pulling steel off of the axe head. And what that does is it defines that edge more, but it also takes off any burr that's left over sharpening. Because a lot of times you get a little burr and that interferes with the sharpness of your edge. And so I'm going to come over here. I just want to show you that this is sharp enough that I can shave hair on my arm a little bit. Okay, so if you want to do a little bit of woodworking with a hatchet like this, you can. The trick is it has to be really sharp. Wood is just a collection of fibers. That's all it is. Just fibers stuck together with a glue called lignin. You look like you want to say something, do you?
No.
Okay. Looks like it.
I'm just visually thinking.
That's fair. That's fair. So wood is just a collection of fibers. So if you think about it, if your tools won't cut hair, how well are they going to cut wood? And the answer is like shit. So you need really sharp tools if you're going to do any work like this. So we're going to make this basic 3-tool mallet. Ironic thing about making a mallet is you kind of need a mallet to make a mallet because we're going to need to strike our tools a little bit. So let's start out by making a temporary mallet. So I'm going to go over to the wood pile. I'm going to take a pretty small piece of wood like this, and I want to split this into a more manageable size. I am not going to do this because that's how you lose a finger, but it's pretty easy to cut a piece of wood like this more safely, to split it more safely, put it in contact with the wood, pick them both up at the same time, and bring them down on your block. And it takes a little persistence. There we go. And that wood, what's that? Oh, this is silver maple. I'll talk about the kinds of wood I'm using as we go. Don't worry, because it matters a lot. I'm going to take this piece over here, and I'm going to start trimming it. And what I want to do is trim off these corners. And so the technique for this is really easy, and I'm going to use it a lot today. You want to weaken the fibers by making cuts up, and then come down with more of a smoothing cut. and that's going to let you take that wood off. And so everything I do today with the hatchet is going to follow that same pattern. A few strokes up like this to break up and weaken those fibers, and then I'm going to come down and take them off. And my goal here is just to make something that I can hold in my hand comfortably.
Did you say what red guidance was?
It's red.
It's red.
Yeah. So it's DMT, and I never really, since I use old oil stones a lot, I never know what grit things are because they never say on them. It's amazing what you can figure out just with your sense of touch. You know, you can really feel, if you've got a couple of stones and you want to know which one is finer, you can just feel that with your hand. So, if people sitting up front, you might get hit by some wood chips. I'm sorry about that. So what I have here is a really good temporary mallet. I just took the piece of wood and made a nice hand grip, and this is all I need. Now I'm ready to start working. So to make my mallet, the first thing I need is a handle. And I want to go to my wood pile and I want to pick my wood intelligently. So I think everybody here knows that there's two types of wood, right? There's hardwood and softwood. Clearly, we're going to use hardwood. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's two families of hardwood. Does anybody know about this? So this is super important. So there's two families of hardwood, and one of them is called ring porous. So wood trees have pores in them, just like your body has blood vessels. And in some pieces of wood, those pores are arranged into rings. And the pores are really big. And you can see that on the end of a piece of wood like this when the grain is very, very pronounced. And you can see it on the side too. This is ring porous wood. That's oak, ash, hickory. This is osage. All of those are called ring porous woods. Big pores packed in rings. The other kind of wood, the other kind of hardwood is called diffuse porous. And that means those pores are very small and they're scattered throughout the wood. I'm not going to show you. You can just visually see the difference. This one is ring porous. See how pronounced the grain is? And this is diffuse porous. And you can see that the wood has a much smoother texture. The grain is much, much less pronounced.
So give us some examples of trees.
So that would be maple, beech,
Maple, beech, walnut,
basswood,
cherry, basswood, sycamore, diffuse porous. Oak, ash, hickory, ring porous. Okay? And the difference matters a ton. So this is, the best analogy I can give is if you're smithing and if you're making a blade or something and somebody hands you a piece of steel, what do you want to know? What isn't? Wood is the same way. It is not all the same stuff. And knowing what you're working with makes a big difference. Less difference if you're just pushing it through a saw. The saw doesn't care. If you're trying to work it with hand tools, it actually matters a lot which wood you have. Ring porous woods like oak and ash and hickory, the fact that they have rings like that means they split really well. They split predictably and straight. And I'll show you that in a second. But the other thing is that they have a particularly tough, springy character. That's why all of your tool handles are made from hickory, because hickory is ring porous, just like oak and ash, but also very dense and heavy. That makes it perfect. Your ring porous woods, your oak, ash, hickory, osage, all of those are springy. So when you hit something, they flex, they don't tend to break, and they're easy on your arm. But they do split really easily. And the splittability of wood is important because it lets us work the wood more easily. So here's a nice straight grain piece. I'm going to use this for the handle of my mallet because of its straight grain. And I'm going to start splitting. And the important thing with splitting is it's not about muscle, it's about persistence. If you've got steel versus wood, which one's going to win? Steel, eventually. So just keep on whacking away, and you can see, and again, ring porous wood. Look how straight and predictable this split. Like really, really good. And so now I can take it again, And most woods really like to be split in halves. They will stay together and split cleanly. It will always split the wood into 2 equal pieces. And what's cool is the more you split it, the less resistance there is. So each time I split it in half, it gets about twice as easy to work with. So as soon as you get that first split done, then the rest of these splits are really, really easy. So this is a piece that would make a great handle blank from a mallet. But I'm not going to use it because it's wet. So this is firewood, but it is super wet wood. People think that wood has to be dry to use it. And that's not true. What you have to know, though, is which wood is dry and which wood is wet. This chair over here was made almost entirely from green wood. It's made from red oak, but the wood was straight from the log. It wasn't dried or anything, and we made the components while the wood was green, while it was wet. And we assembled the chair while most of the components were wet. Some of them were dry. So we're going to do that with our mallet. We're going to use a combination of wet and dry wood, and I'll explain why that is. We don't want to use wet wood for the mallet handle because that handle's going to shrink. What happens if that handle shrinks after we get it in the head? It's going to loosen and fall right out. We can't have that, so we need a dry piece for that. You might be wondering sometimes too, like, got a piece of wood, I don't know, I need a moisture meter. You don't need a moisture meter, that's bullshit. But one thing, you can just feel it. It obviously feels wet. If your hand won't do it, all seriousness, use your cheek. If it feels very cold to the touch, that's wet wood. The other thing you can do, both of these pieces here are wet. Hear that dull thudding noise? So you want to make your mallet, cut a few pieces of your ring porous wood, and just throw them inside, throw them someplace warm. Here's 2 pieces I cut last week. Listen. Hear the difference? You got that ringing noise versus a dull thudding noise. The water in the wood keeps it from vibrating, keeps it from resonating. So you can't get nice ringing sound out of a piece of wet wood. Slap 2 dry pieces together and they make a nice tone. So you can see whether your wood is wet or dry very easily, just that way. So I'm going to take this piece right here. No, I don't want that piece. That's got a check in the end. Let's see what I got over here. Oh, this is a good piece. I'm going to use this piece. So I just cut, 5 or 6 of these pieces out of a red oak log last week. Threw them in my shop near the furnace so they'd be in a dry environment. And I just put a little wood glue on the ends. Wood glue is great for keeping the ends from splitting and checking. You can also use latex paint, whatever, but I'm a woodworker, so I always have wood glue sitting around. And then I don't really trust this piece anyway, that it hasn't checked a little bit. It probably has. So I'm just going to cut off the end of it real quick. And that's where using a saw bench is good. And I can just kneel right on my work. Yeah. Hold on, I can't hear you. There we go. What's the question?
When you're letting the wood dry, how much oversized should you be for checking, splitting, for loss?
I tend to think on the ends, especially, like an inch is usually good. And if you're not sure whether it's done dry or whether it's checking or not, you just take a little piece like this, and if it breaks like that, there's a check in it. But this was really difficult to break, so I think I cut off enough. If you take a little piece off the end and it snaps really easily, that's checked, and you want to take another cut off of there to get past that checking. So I think this end here is going to be just fine. I actually am going to take another cut because I got it a little bit crooked. So let's do one more slice off of here. And that gives us a great opportunity to test our end. That's nice. Tim, what's up?
What do you mean by check?
Oh, check is where the wood, while it's drying, it splits. So that's called checking. It's not really a break or a crack. It's just the fibers separating. And it's especially a problem with ring porous wood. Because ring porous woods split very easily. They're springy, they're tough, they don't break under tension very easily, but they split very easily. It's not a upside or a downside, the splittability of these woods. It's just characteristic that you want to be thinking about working with. So
Yeah,
now
it's just as let me add on to that.
Please do.
As the wood dries, it shrinks. So the ends, because they dry out first, and the middle is still wet, it'll just pop apart.
now that I'm drinking, now you're done.
Yeah.
I was like, well, Ralph got going. I got time for a drink of water. So now I know from this piece, because I can't split it, that piece is good. So now this is going to be an excellent candle blank. So we're all set with this. I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to work on my head. All right, so the ring chorus, right? This is the ring chorus. I am going to use ring chorus for the handle. Now, the truth is, if you're not getting together a firewood mallet, use hardwood, life goes on. It's totally fine. But me, my wood pile is pretty big, and I got a bunch of different species in there. So since I have a choice, I'm going to make that choice intelligently. If I had to make the whole thing out of maple or the whole thing out of cherry, life goes on. It'll be fine. It's a firewood mallet. But you do get to make some decisions. So I'm going to choose that. Now, because those ring chorus species split so easily, you could use oak, head, or ash. So this is a more refined, we call this a joiner's mallet. I use this to strike chisels and stuff. The head is made of ash, but I'm using this on wood-handled chisels. I'm tapping things lightly. It's very unlikely to split. This firewood mallet we're making right here, this is for rougher work. And so that splittability isn't really something we want in the head. So I have here just a piece of silver maple. It's like weed around here. There's so much silver maple. And it's not a particularly hard wood. It's hard enough, but it's diffuse porous. It's got that smooth, even grain, and it doesn't have such a strong tendency to split. So that makes it really good for the head. Sometimes with the head too, believe it or not, it's really good to use a piece that has a knot in it, or to use a piece that comes from the root of the tree, or if it has swirly grain, as long as you can work it into a shape that you like, because all of those things make it much denser and tighter and make it much less likely to split. And one of the things that's great about using firewood is you can usually go out to the wood pile and find a piece that's already pretty square. And that's great, because that means less work. So what I'm going to do is take this piece right here, I'm going over to my chopping block, and I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to square it up. It's already pretty good, so I don't need to do too much. I don't like this dark wood here. This is called the pith. It's the middle of the tree, and it's guaranteed to split. So I'm going to get a little bit of this off of here. And then let's just talk about safety for a minute, because a lot of people are concerned, justifiably, about using an axe or a hatchet. The safety aspect of this is really simple and straightforward. First thing, hold the wood by the end and keep your fingers out of the way as much as possible. Second thing, don't lift your hatchet up above your hand. If it's not above your hand, you can't chop your fingers off with it. Third thing, only work halfway up the piece maximum. Once you get up here, you want to work on this part, turn it around and hold the other end. And then the other thing that matters a lot is sometimes you miss your swing. So I'm right-handed, chopping with my right hand, I keep my right leg back. That's the important thing. So if I miss the swing and I miss the chop, it's just going to pass harmlessly through thin air. And I'm not going to embed my razor sharp hatchet in my thigh. That'll ruin your day. So let's take a look at this head material here. That's pretty good. So I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to look at the end. This one, I'm also lucky it has a nice straight cut on the end. So I'm just going to use that as one of the faces of my mallet. And I think I'm going to have, it usually just looks nicer if the top of the head is wider than the bottom. So if you have something wider, put that on the top. So that means my body was right here. And then you can see on a lot of mallets that the ends are angled. And it's just an ergonomic thing. Having the angled ends just means to bring the mallet down parallel to the floor, you don't have to swing your hand as far. It's easier on your wrist. And what's cool about that is a lot of times the wood in your wood pile already has a bit of an angle to it. It's not cut perfectly straight because it's your wood pile. Who cares? So if it already has a little bit of an angle, that's great. Just put that angle up like this. and then cut the other end sort of to match, and it'll be just fine. So,
Is that the size you normally start with?
Yes.
And this is for the head?
just for the head right here.
Okay.
That's perfect. Any other questions? No, everybody's good. Just shout them out if you got them.
So you're going to take that pith off?
What's up?
You're going to take the pith off?
I took most of the pith
Oh, you
off.
did?
It's pretty good. There's a tiny bit of pith there, not enough to really worry about.
Okay.
I took a little bit off this side here to square it up, and mostly what I'm thinking about is it gonna sit steady so I can drill? That's what I'm really thinking about. It's already pretty straight, so I did a little trimming so that it would sit straight, so I can drill with my hole in it. We're gonna call the hole a mortise because it's gonna accept a tenon, and a hole that takes a tenon is a mortise. And then this face is a little bit. It needs a little bit of straightening as well. It's not as flat as it could be. So same thing, I'm gonna come up and then take off the chips that I've created. That's good. Now we're gonna do a little bit of layout. So you're gonna come over here, your pencil, and I have a little bit of a square. And for a mallet head, I think 6 inches is more than enough, or at least that's what I tell my wife. And lay out about that much right there. And then using a square is handy, but you gotta watch if your wood isn't straight, the square is not gonna read super straight. So I'm also just kind of eyeballing this and making sure I'm perpendicular. I'm gonna give myself a nice line there. I'm gonna carry that line across to the adjacent face. Do the same thing over here, registering that square off the same side. And then if I have half a prayer, all those lines are going to come together. Woof, not even close. Not even close. So we're going to do that. Well, it's very wonky wood, so it's all right. We'll still have a good mallet. There we go. That is close enough. I'll be able to make that work. So now what I want to do is just take off the corners, because the corners of the mallet head would be very vulnerable to splitting because the wood is so thin there. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to come up like this, weaken those fibers, and chop that stuff away. Rotate, same thing, weaken the fibers, and take them off. Same thing, rotate, weaken the fibers and take them off. But using a hatchet like this is a lot like using a hammer when you're smithing. You don't want to take a bunch of tiny little blows, and you don't want to be muscling it. You want to lift up, let gravity do a lot of the work, let it fall. Woo, that wasn't supposed to happen. The important
Drop forward.
didn't try to grab it. These drop forward, all right. So now we're pretty good, and I know what the bottom of my head is going to be. It's going to be right here. So let me measure that. I knew I put that pencil down.
Wow, 72 pencils.
I brought two of them. So I got a backup just in case. So I know this here is my bottom.
That'll last me about 6 months.
Yeah.
Where do they all go? I don't know.
So I'm just gonna measure 3 inches because I had 6 total. Just kind of eyeball center on that. And now we're ready to drill. So I'm gonna go over here to my saw bench. And usually I don't clamp stuff to my saw bench. I just kneel on it. But for this sort of thing, it's going to be a lot nicer to clamp it. So just have a really inexpensive bar clamp. You can buy these for just about nothing. And just clamping it down is going to be just fine. That's got a good hold to it. I'm going to take my drill and I'm going to get to drilling. So I've got a 1-inch drill bit. That's a good size for something like this. This is an old auger bit, but you can use anything you want. It doesn't make a lot of difference. One thing that's really good about the saw bench, well, hold on, I'll talk about the saw bench in a second. One thing that's particularly good about using the bracing bit is how long it is. What's the benefit to that? You can sight it. So it's really easy to tell when you're straight. You don't have to be super straight for this, but pretty straight is good. And it's actually a lot easier to judge straight or plumb in this case with a bracing bit than it is with a hand drill because you've got such a long line.
How deep are you going?
I am going to go 1 3/4 inch, or that's the plan. We'll see what actually ends up happening. So I was talking before about the moisture content of wood, and one of the things that's really good about green wood is it's soft. It's weak, and that makes it easy to work. So you can see it as I'm drilling here. If this was dried hardwood, I'd be getting super out of breath trying to drill a deep hole like this. But because this is just about green wood, it had just come to the firewood dealer when I bought it. It's actually quite easy. As I get deeper in, it's hard enough, but I can make it happen.
So your handle is going to be dry, correct?
That is correct.
So because this head is wetter than the handle, and as it shrinks, it's going to get super tight.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the strategies we're going to use to get a really good fit as we go, and that's one of them. So remember that. So that was 1 3/4 inch. That's exactly what I was looking for. Now, why did I do all the shaping and the drilling on this whole long piece?
So you can handle it.
So the hatchet's not near my hands, so I can clamp it. It's just like when you're smithing and you're working off the bar, instead of using a little piece and holding it with tongs. Woodworking is the same way. If you can work on a longer piece and then cut your finished piece off, that's way better. So in this case, I've got my hole drilled. I know what we're doing. And now I'm going to cut this off, and I'm going to end up with a head that's basically shaped. Put that clamp over there. So it's important to hang my cut line over the edge of the bench, just like that. So I won't cut into my saw bench. And clamp it down. And again, I would typically kneel on my work, but kneeling on a log like this is kind of ridiculous. And it's really important when you're making a cut like this to have 2 lines. Nobody can saw straight if they have 1 line, because 1 line only tells you 1 plane. If I've got a line across the top and a line down the side, and I follow both of those lines at the same time, I'm going to get a cut that's at least square-ish. My wood isn't square to start with, so all kinds of problems are possible. But it's going to be pretty good. So I'm looking up and down on this line to make sure my saw is plumb. And then as far as this direction goes, I have a line like that. And again, wet wood. So it's pretty quick and easy to saw it off.
So why are you changing the angle of your saw?
What's that now?
You're pivoting your saw back.
Yeah, because what's happening here is like I've cut through. Let me just show you here. Like if I cut through this much of the wood, I don't want to cut on this broad surface here. I want to angle the saw so I'm cutting the narrow surface. And I want to keep alternating the way that I'm cutting. That's really a good question, man. I want to keep alternating the way I'm cutting so I'm always working on the most narrow surface.
So it goes through quicker.
What's that?
So it goes through quicker.
It goes through quicker. It's easier. The other thing is that it's easier on the saw because I'm giving it more of a chance to clear the dust out of the saw teeth. The less of the saw is buried in the cut, the more chance you have to get it out. If your saw teeth are clogged with sawdust, they ain't going to cut. So whenever you're cutting with any kind of saw, you have to make sure you're withdrawing the saw enough and cutting in a certain way so the dust falls out. Because the sawdust will stop you from cutting and get your tools perfectly sharp. So now I have a completely shaped mallet head that I can do just a little bit of trimming on. I don't like what this looks like. So I can still work it short like this. I'm just going to use shorter strokes. And I'm going to flip it. Work on the other side. Be very careful of my fingers. So I like that. I think that's good. That piece needs to come off. That's a pretty good mallet head. The other thing that I'm concerned about here is these corners are very, very likely to split because the wooden fibers that are going this way, they're unsupported. So if you're swinging something and catch this corner, these fibers are going to split up. But that's really, really easy to fix just by chamfering. So I've got a rasp here, and you could use a farrier's rasp, anything you want, just by putting a chamfer across all of those sharp corners. That's going to allow the fibers on top to support the fibers underneath. And it's going to really reduce splitting. Even a very small chamfer, like the one I'm using here, is going to greatly reduce the chances that this head is going to split and chip out if I hit towards the edge. And you can really use any rasp or file you have handy. A farrier's rasp is just fine. I know you all have those. This is a wood rasp, but it's one. I mean, I got this for free. Someone just gave me a bucket of tools, and it had a perfectly decent wood rasp in it. So it's a good thing to use, and also a good metal file is totally great for working with wood, especially a very coarse file, double cut file, great for woodworking. Even if they're a little dull, they're still pretty good. Get some water. So now I've got the head done, and I've got the handle shaped. Well, I've got the handle split out anyway. And the thing that I want to just make sure is that I have a wide enough piece of wood here to make a tenon to fit my mortise. All right, so not a peg in a hole, but a mortise and a tenon, even if they're round. And I can just check with my drill bit, which is loose in my brace. And so if I lay my drill bit across here just like this, I can see I have plenty. That's really good. So what I want to do is make my tenon, and the tenon is determined by the mortise. That's why I drill the mortise first. How deep is my mortise?
1 3/4.
1 3/4. So what I want
1.75.
tenon that's a little bit less than that. So I want 1.5. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to get my square again. I'm going to hope it works out better this time. Again, I'm going to eyeball sort of perpendicular to that edge there, and I want to run that line all the way around. And you can use Carpenter's Speed Square for this. That'll work. And this one worked out real nice. The line goes all the way around, and just eyeball keep it parallel to that end. It's not rocket science. And this is a square that I just made, but you can just use a Speed Square, Carpenter Square. It doesn't make any difference. Any square is good. So that lets me know how long my tenon is going to be. And now, I bet you're wondering, how are we going to make a perfectly round tenon that's going to fit in that mortise? It's actually a lot easier than it seems. So I'm going to go over here to my vise. This is one situation where having a vise is really fantastic. An amazing tool. And I'm just going to take my pencil, and I'm going to use my square like a straight edge. And I'm just going to cross the top, connecting the corners. And that's going to give me a very good approximation of where the center is. And then I like these old timer knives because they have an awl built in. I don't have to carry a separate tool. And just using an awl is going to give me a good start with my drill. Because that snail on my drill might wander before it bites in. What I'm going to do to lay out my tenon is come in here with my bit, and I'm just going to drill down until the niggers on that drill bit score the wood. Just that. So I'll show you what I've done. So you see how the drill bit has made a perfectly round circle right there. Because I'm using the exact same drill bit that I used to make the mortise, I know that this layout is exactly the same size.
Brilliant.
We have our moments. You really scared me for a second there. I was not expecting that. To be fair, I don't expect half the shit to be good. Now, all I need to do is get rid of the material around that circle, and I'm going to have a great tenon. And a lot of times, woodworkers would use a chisel for this, and if you have a chisel, by all means, you should use it. Wow, it's any closer, it's going to bit me. But I'm actually going to use my hatchet as a chisel, And I'm going to strike it with my temporary mallet that I just made. Whoops, I almost forgot a super important step. Before I hit anything, I have to make sure I can control the splits that I'm about to make. And that's why that layout I made at 1.5 inches down was really important, because I need to saw that line. So for this, I need a finer saw. My heavy crosscut saw is too coarse for some of the things I'm going to do. This is a Japanese saw. It's called a Ryoba. I'm mostly a Western tool person, but no one can deny that these are very cheap and they cut very well. You can get the Harbor Freight one, and it's perfectly fine for a lot of the work that we're doing here. And I'm just going to use fine teeth on this, and I'll come in here. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting down my line, and I'm trying to eyeball that I'm going to cut through till I almost hit that circle. So I'm just eyeballing what I've got there, and then I'm going to carry that around here, and again, eyeball, and then down, just like that.
And these cut on the pull stroke.
These do cut on the pull stroke. What's nice about using a vise is it doesn't matter whether your tools cut on the push or the pull, because the vise pulls. But one thing I do sometimes, if I don't have a vise, I drill the hole in my block here, and I'll put in a peg, and I'll put my work against that. It gives me something to pull against. So if I have to do demos like this and I don't have a vise handy, just a peg like that. It doesn't work nearly as good as having a vise. I like vices, but it works. So again, just paying close attention. Not crossing over that circle that I made. Getting down close to it. There we go. That's good. We call that, in my trade, stop cut. And a stop cut will keep a split or something else from traveling too far. And so now, what I'm going to do is use my hatchet and my temporary mallet, just like a chisel. Put it.
I'm sure everyone will probably figure it out. Why don't you want to cut too deep into your tenon?
Oh, well, so it's not cutting into the tenon, but if I start splitting here, I'm going to split straight down the handle.
Oh,
I don't know, use too much of it.
Why do you show those that cut? Why do you want to make sure not to go into the circle too much?
Oh, because that's going to allow me to have a tight fit. That circle determines exactly the diameter of my tenon.
If you undercut into there, it could shear off.
It could shear off. Most of the time when I make these mallets, I undercut a little bit, and somehow everything still works out okay. So this is a very rough science right here. But what I want to do is get rid of this excess material very, very quickly, and controlled splitting is the way to do that. So I just keep my chisel, my hatchet in this case, outside of that circle, and I can work quite aggressively, taking off material, and that stop cut that I made is going to make it very easy to control these splits so that they don't go any deeper down in the handle than I want them to.
That stop cut that you just make.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how far, you see where it's cut there, right?
Uh-huh.
So how far down is that approximately?
You mean from here to here?
Yes.
That's 1.5 inches.
Okay.
I've left 1/4 inch, and I'll explain why that is in just a second. But that's a very good question. So what I'm doing here is just making sure, again, I'm staying outside of that circle. That's the really important thing. Very easy to go too far with this and end up with a tenon that's too small, and then your work is kind of ruined. But what's important here too is you notice I didn't do any shaping to my handle. I didn't do any work to make it comfortable, because what I want to do is make sure I have a tenon that works, and then I'll make the handle comfortable. This is the failure point right here. The tenon might not come out, or I might split it, or something like that might happen. But what I want to do then is just lay out and cut another one, or move to a different piece of wood. This might fail, so I'm not going to do anything else until I know this is going to succeed. So once you've gotten most of the material off, I have to show you those few splits took off 80% of it. So if you're splitting with control, with stop cut, you're getting rid of most of that material very, very quickly. And then you can do this. I've done this many times using the hatchet also as the finer shaping tool. If you got a sharp hatchet. There's nothing that's going to keep you from shaving this tenon down. Just using the hatchet and maybe kind of a chopping stroke sometimes and get down all the way to that layout. Done this many times. It works fine. I'm working in a vise, so it's controlled. I can also clamp it to a surface, and that would work really well too. And that's gotten me a little closer. What I found over the years is that you can do it that way. It's honestly a lot better just to rasp it to its final diameter. It's just more controlled and easier. So I'm going to start rasping this. And of course, unlike that saw, the rasp works on the push stroke. So I'm being careful to put my energy and my focus into the push stroke. Don't go back and forth like this because you're not accomplishing anything on the pull stroke. Use the push stroke to do more of your way. Now, even when you're using a rasp, and even when you have a layout like that, it's difficult to tell when you're right on the money. The actual thing that you want to have for that is called a check gauge. So I just took the exact same drill bit that I used before and drilled a 1-inch hole in a piece of plywood. Plywood is perfect for this because it's so sturdy and doesn't wallow out. I'm just going to take my check gauge and put it over and give it a little bit of a rotate, just like that. And what that does is that gives me a very clearly defined circle that I can really see. And I know that where that circle is where I still need to remove more material. So you can see the difference in color. It's light colored and burnished up here. That light colored part, that's what's good. What's beneath that is still too thick. So I'll work down from that circle.
Will the rasp surface be the final surface of the tenon?
It will be the final surface of the tenon, sort of. So I'll show you that in just a second. That's a very good question. So now I've done a little bit more work, and that check gauge goes on a little bit further. And I'm going to keep working. This part that takes time, the time will be rewarded to the good fit. So it's good to do a little shaping, check it with the check gauge, do a little more shaping. And now we're to the point where that check gauge, the tenon is poking through. Down a little further. And again, wherever the gauge already passes, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm going to leave that alone. Just going below that gauge to take off more materials. And you can also sight down a bit. Now that gauge goes on about halfway. So about halfway down. And that's what I always have is the bottom. Always equals the most. Yeah. So I'm not working that top at all because I know that's already the right size. And I'm also just using my eyes. There's still obviously kind of a tapered shape. I don't want that. I want it to be nice and straight. There you go. And I'll be down. We're down. So Jared asked a second ago. That squeaking noise is good. That means take it in. Jared asked a second ago if that rasp surface is going to be my final surface. And the answer is no. Final surface was created by the check gauge. The check gauge burnished the surface of the wood and took all those hairs and fibers off of there. We could have a very boring discussion about which surface is better for gluing. It's wood. I'm using wood glue. The end. There's nothing else we need to talk about. If this were a room full of woodworkers, we would now launch into the most tedious conversation ever. And that's why I belong to a blacksmithing club, not a woodworking club. Because I have zero interest in those conversations. So now I know my tenon is good. We'll give it a look over here. Oh, you know what? It's a little tight. Probably because the air in here is dry, and that hole is already dried out a little bit. So we're gonna do a little bit more work on that. Right there. So because this wood is so wet and so green, yeah, it's actually still a tight fit. Now, what happens sometimes when you're testing it is it gets a little stuck in the head. And you can just put it right down here. But don't pull, because the handle will come out and you will hit yourself in the face. Ask me how I know. Twist.
You're still handsome.
I do my
So the hole in the mallet head, is there any reason to deburr that?
No, the hole is good to go, especially because I use an old auger, and those augers are specifically made for this kind of work. So that auger is going to leave a good surface in there that's going to be ready for the loop. I think that's going to be. That's going to be a good fit. Yeah, that one's going to go in. Pretty tight fit. So now what we want to do is just turn this into something a little bit more approaching a handle. So again, same thing. Right leg back, holding it at the top. And in order to turn this into an acceptable handle, all I really have to do is take off the corners. The rest of it will be fine. Because what I did when I made this handle stock is I deliberately split out a piece that was like basically a good shape. You want to do as little work as possible. I mean, aren't we all lazy fundamentally? So when you're doing the splitting, try to split the wood into a size and shape that's already comfortable-ish. So I like that. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to work in the other direction, holding it for safety. Chops up to weaken the wood, and then coming down to make a nice surface. There you go. That's pretty good.
Motor.
And we need a little bit more.
No, they would delay that. Got good leave.
If you do want to shape the whole thing, there's a tendency to feel like, oh, I'm only going to hold it down here. But for doing controlled work, you are going to hold it up there. So it's worth shaping the entire head. And now that I've done about as much as I can do with the hatchet, I'm going to come in here with an asp and bare in all of those surfaces. That flat, I see a little splintery there. This flat. And this is where a circular stroke really comes in handy because it can cover a lot of distance very quickly, but still get a good smooth surface. So I'll sort of circle the aspen this as I go. That's good. Flip it around. Do the top. This and this.
I'm not sure.
Good.
It is.
That's a pretty decent surface. Now, the trouble with the rasp
Getting low.
is that does not leave a surface that you want to hold. It's very splintery. This one is fine. You just have other sandpapers, great.
Where is it? It's
And this wood is fairly dry, so it's going to sand pretty gracefully. And
You're just rasping the thighs, right? So
I'm
like
by rasping the can to finish size. That's correct. And then I use the hatchet and the rasp to shape the handle. And that went from being a stick of firewood to something that to me is a very acceptable handle very quickly. This is fine. So now we've got a head and we've got a handle. And all we have to do is put them together. We want the head and the handle to stay together until the end of time. When I have joined together, let no man break asunder. You use 3 strategies for this. Ralph Bacon has the first one, and I need to take a sip of water anyway. Ralph, what's our first strategy that's going to keep these two things together? You already said it. That's how I know you know it.
Man.
One's wet and one's dry. Ralph can throw his voice. It's amazing.
Theater.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So as the head dries,
Now
it will
this is-
shrink
Now,
and grip the handle tighter than at installment.
so what we're using is what we call differential moisture, and that's how we built this chair. So all of the upright pieces were wet, straight from the log. All the rungs, these horizontal pieces, were dry. We used a kiln to dry them out. When you put a dry tenon into a wet mortise, the mortise gives some moisture to the tenon, and the tenon swells. And then, as the mortise dries out, it grips it on. So the two things are working together. That's strategy number one. We're going to use 3 strategies to make sure this thing doesn't come off. Strategy number 2. Glue. Hell yes. We're going to put some glue in there. What's strategy number 3? We're going to wedge it. Yes, sir. So we're going to wedge this thing, and we're going to use a really tricky kind of wedge called a fox wedge. This is the wrong hand. This is the one I've been working on. So we're going to use a very tricky kind of wedge called a fox wedge. It's going to be inside, hidden, so you can't even see it. But it's doing a lot of work. Now, the direction we put the wedge in matters tremendously. Look at our handle here, our head, pardon me, and visualize the fibers. Okay? They're going this way. If the wedge spreads apart this way, what's going to happen? We're going to split it. Okay? It's going to come right apart. But if instead the wedge is going this way, all of these fibers are under tension. Tension is the look your wife gives you when you come back from sofa. You're all familiar. What is that piece of crap? You all know what tension is, okay? So what we want to do is we want that wedge spreading in this direction because all these fibers are like pieces of string and they are not going to break no matter how hard you pull on it. It's very hard to get wood to break this way. It's like, look, it's extremely strong that way. So I don't want to cut my wedge slot this way. That would split it. I want to cut it this way. Okay, so this is the way it's going to be in the head. I'm cutting perpendicular to the direction of mallet.
So when you're shaping your handle, you should keep that in mind so you don't split your handle.
So splitting the handle isn't a huge concern because what's going to happen as I drive that wedge in is the mortise is going to constrain how much it can move.
So does it matter which direction you're going to make the cut in that?
Well, that's the only thing that matters. That's the most important thing. So I'm going to make the cut this way across, not along that direction. And these wireless saws have 2 sets of teeth. The fine teeth are for cross cutting, and then the big teeth are for ripping. And this is a rip cut. So once I start my cut, I'm going to switch to that rip saw because that's going to let me make very quick progress. And now I have a nice slit. Well, any kind of make here would be with the grain. Ripping is with the grain. Yes, sir. Ripping is with the grain. Cross-cutting is across the grain. So, yeah, you're 100% right. And then the only other thing I need here is a wedge. And the wedge can be made out of any hardwood. So I just have a scrap cherry here. Any hardwood, it doesn't make any difference. I'm going to put it in the vise just like that. And making a wedge is really simple. No need to overthink it. I'm going to go in from my corner here. I don't know, 3/16, something like that, and cut a little bit until I have a nice curve. And then I'm just going to angle the saw a bit. Then as I get down and my wedge is almost done, I'm going to put my finger against it and press it against that saw plate. There we go. And then I got a wedge without dropping it. Every time I practice this in my shop, I drop the wedge. So this was the first time all week I've got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You're all very kind. Practice does. I should be perfect right now. God knows. So, the thing you want to watch out for with your wedge is very often it's going to be wider than your tenon. And I know, because I did this ahead of time, that in fact it is wider. So it's sticking out on one side a little bit. That's going to interfere with the fit. I can't have that. So you can use a pocket knife for this, anything you want. I'm going to use my hatchet. And I'm just going to go just like this and split off a tiny bit of that wedge. And it's perfectly safe to do it this way if I keep the wood and the hatchet in contact with one another the whole time and then whack it against the chopping block. You're not going to hurt yourself that way as long as the two things are in contact with one another. It's very hard to talk and keep track of the stuff you're working on. Even for me. He's very experienced with the talking. Do an awful lot of it. And yes,
when I'm not talking.
yeah. Well, I'm by myself. I just talk to myself. Oh, where's that thing over there? Where's the glue? What am I going to do with that? What do I like? It's just constant talk. So I've got my 3 pieces, and I'm ready to assemble my mallet. And so I'm going to put these pieces out here just like this. And I'm just going to get wood glue here. We can have a whole nother tedious and pointless argument about which glue to use. Use glue. Just use glue. If it's yellow, it'll be fine. Woodworkers get their panties in a twist over way too much of this stuff, and it irritates me. I do have some chips in there, so I'm going to take my pocket knife and just get those chips out. There we go. So everything's going to seat without anything getting in the way there. Now, the thing that I did here that's important is I drilled a 1 3/4 mortise, but I created a 1.5 tenon. Why did I do that?
Here, space.
Space for what?
Glue.
For glue. What else? Right. So I want that wedge to get pressed in by the top of the mortise as I drive it in. But if I make it all the way as deep as that, that wedge might end up getting pushed in too far and split the handle or cause a problem. Leaving just a little gap means that wedge will just go in as far as it needs to and then stop. So I've got the wedge, I've got the head, I've got the handle, and to be honest, what the glue is doing here, as much as anything, is it's acting kind of as a lubricant. And it's going to make sure that I can actually get the tenon in there because I cut it very tight. It's going to be a tight fit.
How long is your wedge, roughly? I mean,
Oh, well, this one's about an inch. I definitely guesstimate.
Yeah.
You know, you just don't want it to be... So it definitely shouldn't be longer than the slit that you've made in the handle. That's a big mistake. And if it's really short and stubby, it's just obvious that it won't work. You can just eyeball it. The really important thing is that it tapers to a very feather edge because that slit is hard to get stuff into, but it goes in pretty well just like that. Now, I'll put that in my head just that way. This is my last opportunity to make sure things are pretty straight and nice. And then install. And there's always going to be a little gap because you're never going to get it sort of perfect. But that mallet is done. It is 100% ready for use. You need it right now. And over the next couple of days, as the head dries out, as the dry stock here in the handle swells a little bit, and as that glue tightens up, it's just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's how this thing that I made 7 years ago is still being used daily in my shop. I use good wood. I thought about which species I was using, and then I used 3 strategies to connect the tenon and the mortise. And so here's the finished piece. It's it's not much to look at, but it sure does work hard. You all know what that's like. So I'll take some questions at the end, but before we go to questions, huge shout out to Tim Cunningham, who let us use his space. Super appreciated. A big shout out to Grant Mitchner, who asked me to do a presentation. And initially I was like, what am I going to say? I don't know as much about smithing. And he said, you'll think of something. And that was the end of that conversation. So thanks a lot, fellas. I really appreciate it. Questions? Oh, wait, before I take questions, this is my saw bench that I designed with the guys that I work with. We did it a bunch of times. It's really easy. It's 3 2x4s and some screws and some glue. And we usually charge for the plans, but I got a bunch of them photocopied. So everybody can come and take a set of plans if you want and make your own saw bench. It's really, really handy. It's like my favorite tool that a lot of people don't know about. So any questions before we wrap up? Sir, hold on.
Any kind of finish for the mallet you'd recommend?
I put some oil on this just because it darkened the grain and looked nice, but honestly, for a tool like this, I would not bother.
The silver maple sort of saw that's considered a hardwood.
That's true.
Species of maple are more hard.
Sugar maple.
Sugar maple.
Sugar maple is it. And if I had a piece of sugar maple, I definitely would have used it. I'm from Connecticut, where we have sugar. You can't swim a dead cat without hitting sugar maple in Connecticut. And that's what we would have had. We don't have silver maple there. Here we have all silver maple. What's good about the silver maple, though, is that because it's softer, it's workable.
Yeah.
And it is nice to have wood that's easy to work with. Silver maple and cherry. Yeah, and silver maple and cherry. I thought I brought a piece of cherry too. Are a really nice balance between hardness and workability. Soft enough to work, hard enough to stand up, which I really like. And I'll put this mallet in the iron in the hat, so anybody who wants to can walk out and get it. We got a Sharpie, so you can sign it. Yeah, I can sign it, sure.
So I know you did this video on part of your Woodwork for Humans series on YouTube. Do you know the name of the video and the number for anybody who wants to look it up?
I don't know the number, but the video is called the 3-Tool Mallet, or Make This Mallet with 3 Tools, something like that. The video really sucks because I made it a long time ago. It doesn't look very good. This presentation is honestly better than that video. You can look it up and do all the same stuff and cover all the same stuff. Anybody else? All right, thanks a bunch, fellas. I really appreciate the opportunity to be up here and be a presenter. I've enjoyed watching you guys present and learn from you for the past 7 years, and I just love it. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan.
Okay, now stop looking at me. Good job. Oral. Yeah, they love where you find mallets all the time. Very common. Because it's got that wild twisted grain and it doesn't split.